went off unexpectedly. Who's calling me at this late hour? Hopefully, there hadn't been yet another big-scale incident taking place somewhere. Feeling quite anxious, Go Gunhee quickly picked up his phone. Dear, nothing bad happened today. Yes, the call was actually from his wife. Oh, hi, dear. The wife was calling to find out her husband's status since he hadn't come back home yet, even though it was already so late into the night. Her voice managed to gradually soften the stiff face of Go Gunhee. What do you mean, something bad? I was on my home anyway. It was then. The phone suddenly lost its signal. Go Gunhee tilted his head and put the phone down before shifting his attention to the outside of the window unconsciously. He forgot to breathe then. Everything that should be visible through the window was all gone. Various buildings, the roads, even people, all of them. The only thing remaining was the pitch-black darkness that defied all attempt to decipher how deep it was. Only a blink of an eye later, the scenery outside his window had changed to something else entirely. The association president Go Gunhee gasped out in pure shock and was about to get up from his chair. But then, he realized that there was someone else in the office right this moment. Someone he had never even seen before. That man was sitting on the couch as if he had been there for a very long time, too. A human. No, this isn't the aura of a human being. It wasn't just the aura, either. A face as pale as a corpse long, silvery white hair, pointy ears, and silver eyes gleaming brightly like a pair of gemstones. It was an ice elf, also known as the White Phantom. Somehow, Go Gunhee had failed to sense its approach, as well as its entrance into the office. He slowly placed the phone's receiver back into its cradle and quietly threw out a question. Who are you? Would talking to it work? The association president Go Gunhee quietly observed the uninvited guest. However, the creature didn't say anything. Different from other monsters, though, it didn't immediately bare its fangs. No, it just sat there in silence while ignoring the owner of this office altogether. As this uncomfortable silence persisted for a brief period, Go Gunhee found himself with an opportunity to study his new opponent in detail. It looks exactly like an ice elf. This is not an opponent that I can deal with. Go Gunhee quickly assessed his situation, and then very softly flipped his smartphone up to glance at the screen in order to signal for help. When he did that, the monster shifted its gaze over to him. Go Gunhee confirmed that the smartphone had no signal, just as the creature had said, and put the device down. Am I dreaming a bad dream right now? Not only did a monster intrude into the HQ of Korea's Hunters Association right in the middle of Seoul, it even began speaking in Korean, too. It was then. Go Gunhee felt a sharp pain brush past his left shoulder and quickly grabbed it tight. Something happened the moment this monster pointed at him. He cautiously lifted his hand away to discover a cut wound on the shoulder, as if something sharp had sliced him up. The truly mystifying thing was, even though his flesh had been sliced open, not a drop of blood came from the wound. The monster was still sitting relaxedly on the same spot in the couch. Go Gunhee nodded his head. I see. So, this is reality. In that case, let me ask you again. Just what are you? The monster slowly stood up from the couch. At the same time, couches, the coffee table, and other furniture nearby the creature were shoved violently away and crashed into the walls. The furniture froze up in an instant and got stuck on the walls. Oh my god. Go Gunhee's eyes opened wider. The goosebumps-inducing chill slowly permeated into the office of the association president. Just who would dare to label Go Gunhee as a weakling in this world? However, he realized that he couldn't dispute that claim. The creature before his eyes possessed this Mount Tai-like authoritative power, and whenever it opened its mouth, its voice reverberated and exploded like a thunderclap. This thing was on another realm compared to him. He possessed incomparably excellent senses, so he could instantly figure out the differences between his and his opponent's power level. A powerful explosion swept away the spot where Go Gunhee had been standing on. White smoke created from the extreme coldness rose up like a veil of fog and covered the surroundings until it was impossible to see anything. But then, a pair of flames emitting pure light began burning brightly within this smoke. Those were a pair of eyes glowing in a golden hue. The monster confirmed the color of the light oozing out from the screen of whiteness and formed an eerie smile, before throwing the remaining clump of cold air in its other hand. Go Gunhee swung his arm and swiped that cold air away. It was flung away and crashed heavily against the wall. The cold air exploded and the entirety of the wall was blown away. Through the gaping opening, one could see a space filled with endless pitch-black darkness. The white smoke obscuring the view slowly dissipated, and the unheard association president Go Gunhee was revealed in full. Not just his two eyes, but his whole body was enveloped in this stupendous golden aura that wavered around gently in the air. You separated the president's office and hid it in between dimensions. Quite impressive. A completely different voice than how he normally sounded came out from Go Gunhee's mouth. The monster began speaking again. Unlike the tone of voice that sounded emotional, the monster's expression remained unchanging. With a frozen, stiff face, it continued to speak. This time, it was Go Gunhee's expressions turned to harden. Not only him, but the locations of all the rulers had been exposed, and 2 had already lost their vessels as well. Such a counterattack was out of the ruler's expectations. The monster formed a creepy smile. Do your worst, Sovereign of Frost. Go Gunhee roared out thunderously. The wavering golden aura surrounding his body intensified by a step, before transforming into a figure emitting this bright light from his entire body. The darkness filling up the space beyond was illuminated brightly in an instant. However, even though it was being subjected to this incredible power, the Sovereign of Frost didn't bother to wipe that ridiculing smile off its lips. Ice-cold white light oozed out from the Sovereign's eyes. At the same time, the floor beneath its feet began freezing up. Just like how the bright golden light was enveloping Go Gunhee, the intense and bitterly cold air surrounded the Sovereign's entire figure. And then, the creature bared its fangs. At this moment, when the Sovereign had let down its guard, Go Gunhee instinctively realized that this could be his only chance and dashed forward like an arrow to pounce on the Sovereign. Unfortunately, the opponent's reaction was definitely not slow, either. The golden light and the cold air got into a messy tangle and caused a series of intense explosions. But, as the battle became protracted, Go Gunhee's movements visibly dulled. Compared to his enemy, the injuries on his body continued to accumulate. As his actions got harsher and heavier, more and more white steam leaked out from his panting mouth. The length of time a patient at death's doorstep could fight while stuck in such coldness was at best 2 minutes tops. Just as the Sovereign had alluded to, the result of this fight was already set in stone. His stamina had already reached its limit. Go Gunhee had already expended more than the permitted amount of magical energy his body could handle. His eyes became bloodshot, and blood began leaking out from the corner of his lips. Too bad, all of his efforts were for naught. A sharp ice spike stabbed directly into his chest and emerged out his back. Go Gunhee spat out a mouthful of blood. The Sovereign of Frost inflicted a mortal wound on its opponent with an ice spike shooting out from the tip of its hand. Go Gunhee panted heavily as he intensely glared at his enemy. You think I fought you without a plan? His left hand powerfully and tightly grasped the Sovereign's wrist just beneath his chest. Just like how we didn't expect you to imitate our ways, a huge variable has occurred that exceeds your expectation. The eyes of the Sovereign grew wider as it studied the expression of confidence on Go Gunhee's face. A bluff? No, it couldn't be. His expression was too loaded with hidden meanings for that. Just as the Sovereign's thoughts arrived at that point, the creature had to hurriedly tilt its head to the side. Truly by a paper-thin margin, an incredible amount of magical energy shot past the location where its head was only a millisecond ago. The attack was so powerful that it even burnt away Go Gunhee's right arm after firing it. The magic energy crashed into the opposite wall of the separated space and caused a ginormous explosion. The entirety of the separated space trembled from the sheer power. If such an attack found its intended target, just what might have happened? That was dangerous. Too bad for the human. The Sovereign had sensed the enemy's intention in that instant, and as a result, was able to dodge it at the very last possible moment. The Sovereign stared at Go Gunhee, who must have exhausted all of his remaining energy from that attack, and formed a smile. That smile was clearly one of ridicule. However, Go Gunhee was smiling along as well. That's right. The Sovereign discovered that smile floating up on the pale, waning face of the human and began feeling this puzzling sense of encroaching ill omen. How come it was being overwhelmed by this creeping chill, even though victory was at hand? Its puzzlement didn't last for long, though. Crack. The Sovereign's gaze quickly shifted to its rear. The barrier separating this space from the outside was crumbling into pieces after that enormous magical energy slammed into it. Was this his original intention? Even then, didn't this act ultimately a meaningless resistance? It was then. The consciousness of the ruler dwelling within the old man's body raised the corner of his lips. Will it really be that way? Soon, the barrier shattered completely and the space regained its original appearance. Lights from the other buildings, cars on the streets below those buildings, and the president's office, too. Everything returned to their original place, which meant Go Gunhee summoned up the last of his strength and shouted at the ground beneath him. Now, from beneath his feet, a blob separated from his shadow and rapidly transformed into that of a certain ant. This creature avoided the Sovereign altogether and, while screeching out loudly, jumped outside the window. Tick. The Sovereign quickly shifted its gaze over to that creature. It couldn't understand why a denizen of the Chaos world suddenly appeared here. However, it was just that, a lone denizen. It was just a weakling of a soldier that submitted to the king of insects. That was all. Even then, the Sovereign couldn't rip its eyes away from that ant getting further and further away. Could it be? Eventually, the Sovereign's brows shot up higher. It should have realized the truth from the beginning. It should have realized that the reason why the fragment of the brilliant light poured out enough power to shatter the barrier even at the heavy cost to the human's body, when the ruler always chose to conserve its strength, worried that the vessel would break sooner if it went all out. Indeed, the beastard hadn't been resisting so bitterly in order to escape from the barrier. There was yet another reason behind his actions. No, the Sovereign of Frost belatedly realized the identity of that ant, and its eyes grew even wider than before. The Sovereign hurriedly discarded Go Gunhee and leapt in the direction where that ant had run off to. Cold air coalesced in its hand and froze up to create an ice sickle. The creature instantly arrived at the ant's location and slammed down with its ice sickle. But then, the wrist wielding the sickle was immediately grabbed by someone's hand. The grasping power was so great that the Sovereign couldn't retract its arm at all, no matter what. But, even before the creature had any time to be surprised by that power, its neck was grabbed hard, too. The Sovereign of Frost confirmed just who appeared in the spot where the ant had disappeared from and felt its heart tumble to the pit of its stomach. And then, it asked in a disbelieving tone of voice. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo grasped the neck of this Sovereign of Frost tightly so it wouldn't be able to escape, and shot at a puzzled look. An ice elf. Jin-Woo had a bit of history with the monsters called ice elves. Didn't he encounter these creatures when he stumbled into a red gate for the first time in his life? How rueful did he feel back then, after seeing the boss mob Baruka slipping out of his hands while leaving only a dagger behind. Just remembering that event brought back all the bad emotions he felt then after failing to extract that monster's shadow. And here I was, having just barely forgotten about it. While gripping the monster tightly, he asked this mysterious ice elf a question. The monster gritted its teeth and shook off Jin-Woo's hands. What an incredible physical strength. Even before he had the chance to get surprised from the monster slipping out of his grasp, Jin-Woo picked up on this chilling aura coagulating around the creature's mouth. Inexplicably, the image of Demon King Baron shooting lightning out of its mouth overlapped with this beastard. By sheer instinct, Jin-Woo tilted his torso away. The bitterly cold air shot out from the monster's mouth, sped past Jin-Woo's original position, and poured out into the air behind him. After confirming the scary amount of magical energy being poured out by the monster with his two eyes, Jin-Woo quickly retreated an adequate enough distance away. He lightly dusted the particles of ice clinging onto his shoulder and stared intently at the ice elf. No, the Sovereign of Frost. What was this fool talking about? Jin-Woo was getting rather curious about the meaning behind this monster's constant babbling. But too bad, he didn't have enough leeway to hold a cordial cue in a session with this creature. Jin-Woo took a glance at the hurting shoulder and quietly summoned the Demon King's short swords from his inventory. Weapons silently appeared in his hands. Is it a mage-type creature? Judging from how it barely managed to get out of his grasp, its physical strength or defenses didn't seem to be as high as its magical energy reserve suggested. Which was a relief, actually. He knew from his vast experiences in fighting many different types of monsters up until now that the mage-type enemies were the easiest to deal with since they could be killed in an instant. Jin-Woo frowned deeply. He had no desire to let this guy leave, so just who decided when they would stop fighting? Meanwhile, the Sovereign pointed towards the broken wall of the Hunters Association building. Technically speaking, he came here because the ant soldier he left behind in the association president's shadow sent him an urgent alert. That was all. Jin-Woo's gaze shifted towards the location the Sovereign's outstretched finger was pointing at, and he found Go Gunhee lying on the floor there. The unconscious association president was covered in blood from head to toe, and even at a casual glance, he could tell that the man's life was hanging precariously on the edge. A large, incredibly sharp ice lance suddenly formed on the left hand of the Sovereign. The moment the creature's words came to an end, the lance flew towards Go Gunhee. Jin-Woo's eyes widened. He pushed his concentration to the absolute max, causing the flow of time to slow down greatly. He watched the lance fly agonizingly slowly, but accurately, towards the unmoving association president. Ruler's authority. He tried to use his invisible hand to stop the ice lance, but the magical energy of the one who threw it easily thwarted his attempts. Enraged, Jin-Woo shifted his glare at the Sovereign of Frost. The beastard was waiting for Jin-Woo's answer, that was. He bit his lower lip before dashing towards the spot where the association president Go Gunhee had collapsed on. The air where Jin-Woo used to be wavered and tumbled about from the explosive power. Just before the lance landed, he arrived by Go Gunhee's side first with almost no time to spare and dragged the unmoving man away from the weapon's trajectory. Further enraged by this cheap tactic, Jin-Woo raised his head to look, but the beastard was already jumping into a small gate to escape from this battle. In a rush, he quickly summoned Baruka's dagger from the inventory and threw it. Dagger rush. The dagger flew in a dead straight line and accurately stabbed into the Sovereign's shoulder. The Sovereign of Frost glared at the dagger in its shoulder, then glared at the one who threw it next at Jin-Woo and gnashed its teeth. It soon disappeared into the depth of the gate. Jin-Woo was thinking of chasing after the creature, but seeing the gates gradually shrink in size, he gave up on that idea. Besides, Go Gunhee's current condition wasn't good enough for him to focus his attention elsewhere. The older man gasped out a pained moan. Jin-Woo's lips closed shut in a straight line as he watched the association president Go Gunhee teeter precariously on the edge of life and death. This can't be healed with a healing potion. In that case, the best response he could come up with was to. Jin-Woo yelled out at the top of his lungs, "Baru!" Right away, he sensed the familiar aura hurriedly fly out from his apartment from afar away. Baru smashed past several walls after flying in with all his might and entered the president's office, before kneeling down in front of Jin-Woo. "Have you called for me, oh my king?" Jin-Woo cautiously lowered Go Gunhee's upper torso on the floor and took a step back. There was so much blood dripping out from the association president that Jin-Woo's hands were now painted crimson just from supporting the older man's torso for a few seconds. Jin-Woo's complexion grew gloomier as he stared at the droplets of blood fall to the floor from his fingertips. Baru did as his master willed it and approached Go Gunhee. He began using up all of his magical energy healing the gravely injured man. Unfortunately, the complexion of the dying man didn't want to improve at all even with such a concerted healing effort. Baru panicked and opened his mouth. My king." Baru's scared eyes shifted over to Jin-Woo as he spoke. "My healing magic isn't working on him. I can't heal this man." "What?" He didn't seem to be exaggerating, because Baru's hands were shuddering as he continued on with his healing magic. Even Jin-Woo could sense the enormous amount of Baru's magic energy being spent right now. At this rate, even the former Ant King would keel over from exhaustion. Jin-Woo halted the healing effort and sat down next to Go Gunhee to take a closer look at the man's current condition. Despite Baru's near-selfless efforts, the association president's vitality had weakened even further than before. Whatever that attack was, the hole in Go Gunhee's chest didn't want to close up even after Jin-Woo poured in a whole bottle of the most expensive healing potion sold in the store. Out of sheer desperation, he even summoned out the bottle of divine water of life, but before he could use it, someone grasped his wrist. "Please, stop." It was Go Gunhee. He managed somehow to force his eyes open. Association president. His breathing remained heavy as if it was on the brink of cutting out. He still got to confirm the faces of Jin-Woo and Baru next to him, though. "You did come for me." "Thank you." A weak smile spread on Go Gunhee's face. "Please, hold on for a little bit longer. I'll take you to a hospital right now." Jin-Woo's urgent voice only managed to earn a shake of Go Gunhee's head. "It's useless. The attack that got me far exceeds the level of being curable with medicine or magic." "But, sir," Jin-Woo was about to get angry after hearing those words of weakness from the association president, but he had to stop. Go Gunhee's trembling hand was grasping his. "That was why. Listen to me." As if he was spurring on the dying embers of life for one last hurrah, Go Gunhee's brows rose up high, his eyes opening up wide. "I was able to get in touch with the will of the great beings. I saw their plans, who our common enemies are, and the things that we must do." The blood pooling in Go Gunhee's mouth gurgled and welled up. "What a relief that you're here with us. To think you'd possess that kind of power. Thank you, God." Tears began welling up in Go Gunhee's eyes as he stared at Jin-Woo. He then grasped the young hunter's hand with both of his own and spoke with a trembling voice. "Gates and dungeons weren't for them. In order to protect us, they chose this method," and cough. At that moment, Go Gunhee coughed and reddish-black blood spluttered out from his mouth. Jin-Woo hurriedly tried to use the divine water, but Go Gunhee shook his head. He knew the condition of his own body better than anyone. "Sometime in the future there will come a time when you must make a decision. When you do, I pray that you remain on the side of mankind." Hearing the pain-gasping voice of Go Gunhee, Jin-Woo felt as if his heart was being ripped to pieces. But all he could do right now was to quietly listen to his words. That's all he could do. "I always wished I could fight alongside young people like you. But this body of mine made sure that would never happen." For the first time ever, Go Gunhee poured out what was in his heart without holding back. "I don't regret anything. I can now entrust the future to young people like you. That's all I ask for." Go Gunhee's hands holding onto Jin-Woo's powerlessly fell to the floor, and he was no longer staring at the young man, but at the ceiling of his office. Was it because his tears had spread out? The lights hanging on the ceiling, the ones he always thought were a bit too dim for his liking, seemed excessively blinding today. Go Gunhee shielded his eyes to block those lights. I'm truly relieved. Thank you. At the end of those words, the association president Go Gunhee stopped murmuring altogether, confirming that he was no longer breathing now. Jin-Woo wordlessly closed the deceased man's unmoving eyes shut. Like his final words of gratitude, the expression on his face was one of peace. Jin-Woo raised his head above to stare outside. He saw through the destroyed wall the raindrops falling from